The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street in charming California, as Madison Grace Harper wheeled herself along the cracked sidewalk. The October air carried a crisp edge, and the smell of pine from the surrounding forests mixed with exhaust fumes from passing vehicles. At 22 years old, Madison had learned to navigate a world that wasn't designed for her. But some days were harder than others. Her cerebral palsy affected her motor control, confining her to a wheelchair since childhood. But her mind was sharp, her spirit unbroken, and her talent for graphic design had started to gain recognition among local businesses. Today, she was celebrating a small victory. A coffee shop had hired her to redesign their logo. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Madison had chosen Thornton's family restaurant for her celebratory dinner. The establishment had been a charming fixture for 15 years, known for its home-style cooking and supposed family-friendly atmosphere. The building was a converted Victorian house painted cream and burgundy, with a wraparound porch and hanging flower baskets that swayed gently in the breeze. As Madison approached the entrance, she noticed the wooden ramp alongside the stairs. A good sign, she thought. She pushed through the accessible door and wheeled herself into the dining area. The restaurant was moderately busy for a Thursday evening. Families occupied booths along the windows, couples sat at intimate tables in the center, and the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air. A young hostess named Kelly Ann Morrison approached with menus, her smile faltering slightly when she saw the wheelchair. Table for one?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Yes, please," Madison replied warmly, used to the awkward reactions. Somewhere near the window would be great. Kelly hesitated, glancing toward the back of the restaurant. Let me just check with Mr. Thornton." Madison's stomach tightened. She'd experienced this before. The hesitation, the sudden need to check on something. She watched as Kelly disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a tall, heavy-set man in his mid-50s. Richard Bradley Thornton wore an expensive polo shirt that strained against his belly, and his face carried the ruddy complexion of someone who enjoyed his own cooking a bit too much. "I'm Richard Thornton, the owner," he announced, his voice carrying across the dining room. Several nearby diners turned to look. "I'm afraid we don't have appropriate seating available for you right now." Madison felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I can see at least 4 empty tables," she said, keeping her voice steady, despite the humiliation building inside her. "Any of those would work fine." Richard's expression hardened. "Miss, our tables are designed for regular customers. Your situation would block the aisles and create a fire hazard. It's a safety issue." "The aisles are plenty wide," Madison countered, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. "And I have every right to—" "You have the right to leave my establishment if you can't follow the rules," Richard interrupted, his voice rising. A man in his late 20s emerged from the kitchen, Derek Michael Thornton, Richard's son and the restaurant's manager. He had his father's build, but was leaner, with slicked-back hair and a perpetual sneer. "What's the problem here?" Derek asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and approved of his father's stance. "This young woman is refusing to leave after being informed we can't accommodate her," Richard explained, as if Madison wasn't sitting right there. Derek crossed his arms and looked down at Madison with barely concealed disgust. "Look, we run a family restaurant. Parents bring their kids here. Having someone like you sitting in the middle of the dining room makes people uncomfortable. It's bad for business." The words hit Madison like physical blows. Around them, the restaurant had grown quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, and the weight of their stares was crushing. "Someone like me?" Madison's voice cracked slightly. "I'm a paying customer. What you're doing is discrimination." and it's illegal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Go ahead and sue me, sweetheart. By the time any lawyer takes your case seriously, you'll have spent more on legal fees than this meal would have cost. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave my restaurant. Madison's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in front of these people. Her breathing came faster, and she could feel the familiar tension building in her muscles. Stress always made her symptoms worse. She wanted to say something cutting, something that would wipe the smugness off their faces, but her throat had closed up. Derek took a step closer, looming over her wheelchair. We can call the sheriff if you want to make this difficult. Is that how you want this to go? The threat hung in the air. Madison knew Sheriff Victor Allen Rothschild was friends with the Thorntons. She'd seen them drinking together at the local bar. She would get no help from law enforcement. Not tonight. Fine, she whispered, hating how defeated she sounded. She began to turn her wheelchair around, navigating the narrow space between tables. Her hands shook on the wheels, and she accidentally bumped into a chair, making it scrape loudly against the floor. Careful with the furniture, Derek called after her mockingly. A few nervous laughs rippled through the dining room. Madison's vision blurred with tears as she made her way toward the exit. The accessible door suddenly seemed miles away. She could feel everyone watching her retreat, and the shame was suffocating. This was supposed to be a celebration, an acknowledgement of her hard work and small success. Instead, it had become another reminder that she didn't fit, that her existence inconvenienced others. She was halfway to the door when she heard it, the deep, unmistakable rumble of motorcycle engines. Not just one or two, but several, growing louder as they approached. Through the restaurant's front windows, Madison could see a group of bikers pulling into the parking lot, their leather cuts visible even from inside. The Samcro members cut their engines in a practiced synchronization. The lead bike was a customized Harley-Davidson, and its rider moved with the confident ease of someone who'd been on two wheels his entire life. Jax Teller swung his leg over the bike and pulled off his helmet, running a hand through his long blonde hair. At 32, he carried himself with a mix of dangerous charm and weary authority. Behind him, 5 other members of the Sons of Anarchy Motorcycle Club dismounted. Robert Bobby James Mitchell, the club's treasurer, was in his late 40s with a gentle face that belied his imposing size. Beside him were younger members, Thomas Tommy Ryan Daniels, Marcus Jeffrey Walsh, and Christopher Chip Allen Peterson. All in their 30s, all wearing the Samcro patch with pride. They'd been riding back from a run to Lodi, discussing club business and looking forward to a hot meal. Thornton's wasn't their usual spot. They typically ate at the clubhouse or at Lumpy's bar, but it was convenient, and the food was decent. Jax was first through the door, and he immediately sensed the tension in the room. Years of reading situations for potential threats had honed his instincts. He saw Madison in her wheelchair, frozen near the exit, tears streaming down her face. He saw the Thornton men standing in the middle of the dining room with expressions of smug satisfaction. He saw the other diners looking away, complicit in their silence. Everything all right here? Jax's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. He didn't move toward Madison or the Thorntons. He just stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space. The other Samcro members filed in behind him, forming an unintentional wall of leather and steel. Richard's confident demeanor flickered for just a moment before he recovered. Just handling a customer issue. Nothing that concerns you boys. Find yourselves a seat, and Kelly will be right with you. Jax's blue eyes moved from Richard to Madison, taking in her distress, the position of her wheelchair near the exit, and the way Derek was standing, with his arms still crossed in a posture of authority. He'd seen enough confrontations to reconstruct what had happened. "Seems like this young lady was leaving," Jax observed, his tone carefully neutral. "That her choice? Or yours?" "I don't see how that's your business," Derek interjected, trying to match Jax's confidence, but failing. There was something about the way the bikers stood there, utterly relaxed, but coiled with potential energy, that made Derek's bravado ring hollow. Bobby moved to stand beside Jax, his massive frame casting a shadow across the nearest table. "We're making it our business," he said simply. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. Richard's face reddened. "Look, I don't want trouble. This is a private establishment, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone." "Not based on disability, you don't," Jax replied. He took a few steps into the restaurant, and the other members spread out slightly, not threatening, but definitely present. "That's federal law, ADA. You might have heard of it." Madison watched this exchange with growing disbelief. These bikers, men who looked like they could tear the restaurant apart with their bare hands, were defending her? It didn't make sense. In her experience, people either looked away or joined in the humiliation. No one ever stood up for her, especially not strangers. "She's the one who wouldn't leave when asked," Derek argued, his voice rising defensively. "We explained that we couldn't accommodate her wheelchair, and she got difficult about it." Tommy stepped forward, his young face hardening. "Looks like you've got plenty of room to me. Wide aisles, accessible door, even a ramp outside. What exactly can't you accommodate?" "Our other customers' comfort," Richard stated flatly, apparently deciding that honesty was his best strategy. "People come here for a pleasant dining experience. They don't want to eat while staring at someone in a wheelchair. It's uncomfortable, especially for children." The silence that followed that statement was absolute. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to stop. Jax's jaw tightened, and Bobby closed his eyes briefly as if in pain. The younger Sam Crow members looked at each other, their expressions darkening. "You've got to be fucking kidding me," Marcus muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jax held up a hand, stopping whatever else Marcus was about to say. He walked slowly toward Richard, his motorcycle boots loud on the hardwood floor. When he was close enough that only Richard could clearly hear him, Jax spoke in a low, dangerous voice that somehow carried throughout the restaurant anyway. "Let me explain something to you, Richard. That young woman has more courage in her little finger than you've got in your whole body. She navigates a world full of assholes like you every single day. And she still shows up, still tries to participate in normal life. And you stand here in your comfortable restaurant with your able body and your ignorant mind, and you tell her she's not good enough to eat your overpriced meatloaf?" Richard opened his mouth to respond, but Jax wasn't finished. "No, you're going to listen. You're going to apologize to her. You're going to give her the best table in this place. You're going to serve her whatever she wants, on the house. And you're going to treat her with the respect that every human being deserves. Or," Jax paused, letting the word hang there, "we can discuss this another way. Are you threatening me?" Richard blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. He was very aware that he was surrounded by bikers, that his regular customers were watching, and that his son had gone pale beside him. "I'm explaining consequences," Jax corrected. "See, word gets around in a small town like Charming. People talk. And if people started talking about how Thornton's discriminates against disabled customers, how you humiliate young women for profit, well, that'd be bad for business, wouldn't it? Especially if certain motorcycle clubs decided to share that information far and wide." Bobby moved to Madison's wheelchair. Up close, he could see she was trembling, though whether from anger, fear, or residual humiliation, he couldn't tell. Probably all three. He crouched down to her eye level, his expression impossibly gentle. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Madison, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Madison Harper. Well, Madison, I'm Bobby. That's Jax over there reading Richard the Riot Act. And these are my brothers, Tommy, Marcus, Chip. We're sorry you had to deal with this bullshit. Nobody should be treated the way they just treated you. Madison looked into Bobby's kind eyes and something inside her broke open. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over. I just wanted dinner, she sobbed. Just wanted to celebrate something good that happened today. Bobby's expression hardened, though his voice stayed gentle. What were you celebrating? I got hired for a design job. First real client beyond friends and family. That's fantastic, Madison. That deserves a proper celebration. Bobby stood and turned to Richard, who was still facing off with Jax. Hey, Richard. Madison here just landed her first professional design contract. She came to your restaurant to celebrate that achievement, and you threw her out like garbage. How's that sit with your family values? The other diners were no longer pretending to eat or mind their own business. They were watching intently, and several looked ashamed. A middle-aged woman named Patricia Ann Crawford stood up from her table, her face flushed. I've been coming here for years, Patricia said, her voice shaking slightly. And I'm disgusted. Absolutely disgusted. If this is how you treat people, Richard, you won't see me or my family here again. She threw money on her table and walked toward the exit, pausing to squeeze Madison's shoulder gently as she passed. I'm sorry, honey. You deserved better. Her departure seemed to break a dam. Two other families stood and gathered their things, murmuring apologies to Madison as they left. Richard watched his customers walk out with mounting panic. Now wait just a minute, he started, but Jax cut him off. It's simple, Richard. You've got a choice. Make this right now, or watch your business tank. Your call. Derek tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad, maybe we should... Shut up, Derek, Richard snapped, but his fight was clearly draining away. He looked at Madison, and for the first time, seemed to really see her, not as an inconvenience or a liability, but as a person he deeply wronged. The calculation behind his eyes was obvious. Apologize and save face, or stand his ground and lose everything. Miss Harper, Richard said stiffly, perhaps I was hasty. We can accommodate you after all. Please, let Kelly show you to a table. It was the weakest, most insincere apology Madison had ever heard. But before she could respond, Jax shook his head. Not good enough. Try again, and this time, mean it. Richard's jaw worked silently. The restaurant had never been so quiet. Finally, he exhaled heavily and approached Madison's wheelchair. When he spoke again, his voice was marginally more genuine. Miss Harper, I apologize for my behavior. It was discriminatory and wrong. You're welcome to dine here, and your meal will be complimentary. I hope you can forgive my ignorance. Madison looked up at him, then at the bikers surrounding her, then back at Richard. Part of her wanted to leave anyway, to maintain her dignity and never give this place her business. But another part, the part that was tired of being pushed around, tired of accepting defeat, wanted to stay. I'll stay, she said quietly, but not because of your apology. Because I have every right to be here, and I won't be chased away. Jax smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Damn right you do. Bobby, help Madison find a good table. Guys, we're staying for dinner. Seems like this place needs to practice its customer service. The Samacro members moved through the restaurant with easy confidence, pulling tables together to create space for Madison's wheelchair at the center of their group. Bobby personally ensured she had enough room and was comfortable. Kelly approached nervously with menus, her hands shaking slightly as she distributed them. As Madison settled in, Surrounded by leather-clad bikers who'd become her unexpected champions, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of belonging. These men didn't look at her with pity or discomfort. They looked at her like she was someone worth defending, someone who mattered. Jax sat across from her, his menu unopened. "So, graphic designer, huh? That's impressive. What kind of work do you do?" And just like that, the evening shifted from humiliation to celebration. Madison found herself talking about her work, her hopes, her struggles with finding clients who saw past her disability. The Samcro members listened with genuine interest, asking questions and sharing their own stories. Bobby talked about his love of Elvis. Tommy discussed his attempts at writing music. Marcus described his work as a mechanic. The food came. Richard had apparently instructed the kitchen to prepare their best dishes, and the conversation flowed. Other diners watched with curiosity, their initial discomfort giving way to something else. Several people approached the table on their way out, apologizing to Madison for not speaking up earlier. As the evening wore on, Madison realized something profound had shifted. She'd come to this restaurant alone, expecting a quiet celebration of a small victory. Instead, she'd faced her worst nightmare, public humiliation and discrimination, only to be rescued by the most unlikely allies imaginable. When the meal finally ended, Jax asked for her phone number. "I want to make sure you're doing okay after tonight," he explained. "And Samcro takes care of its own. Consider yourself under our protection now." Madison entered her number into his phone, still somewhat dazed by the entire experience. As the bikers prepared to leave, Bobby pulled her aside. "Listen, Madison, what happened tonight wasn't your fault. Don't let assholes like Richard make you feel small. You've got friends now. Real friends. You need anything at all, you call one of us. Understood?" Madison nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She watched as the Samcro members walked out into the October night, their boots heavy on the wooden porch. The rumble of their motorcycles starting up filled the air. A sound that would forever remind her of the night strangers became heroes. Richard and Derek stood behind the counter, their faces carefully neutral, but their humiliation obvious. They'd been forced to back down, forced to confront their own prejudice, and they'd done so under the watchful eyes of their community. As Madison finally left the restaurant, 2 hours after she'd initially tried to, she felt different. The humiliation was still there, a raw wound that would take time to heal. But alongside it was something new, the knowledge that she wasn't alone, that there were people willing to fight for her, and that sometimes justice came from the most unexpected places. The October air felt fresher as she wheeled herself to her adapted van. The sound of motorcycles had faded into the distance, but their impact remained. Madison sat in her driver's seat for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Tomorrow, she would call the lawyer her mother had been urging her to consult. She would file a formal complaint against Thornton's. She would use her voice and her rights, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd been made to feel less than human because of their disabilities. But tonight, she would go home and celebrate properly. Not just the design job, but something more important. The discovery that she was stronger than she'd ever known, and that the world, despite its cruelty, still contained people worth believing in. As she drove through the quiet streets of Charming, Madison Harper began to understand that her story was just beginning. The next morning arrived with the kind of brilliant California sunshine that made everything look deceptively perfect. Madison woke in her small apartment on Oak Street, and for a blissful moment, the previous night felt like a strange dream. Then reality crashed back. The humiliation, the confrontation, and the unlikely rescue by the Sons of Anarchy. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her mother, Eleanor Marie Harper, and a text from an unknown number. "Morning, Madison. It's Jax. Just checking in. How you feeling today?" Madison stared at the message, still processing that the leader of a motorcycle club, a man who'd faced down the Thorntons with controlled fury, was concerned about her well-being. She typed back, still processing everything. "Thank you again for last night." The response came within seconds. "You've got nothing to thank us for. What you went through was wrong. Speaking of which, Bobby's wife Emma wants to meet you. She's a nurse at St. Thomas. Says she might have some information that could help if you're thinking about filing a complaint. Free for coffee this afternoon?" Madison hesitated. Part of her wanted to retreat into her apartment and pretend the world didn't exist for a few days. But the larger part, the part that had decided last night to fight back, knew she couldn't hide. "Where and when?" she typed. "Lumpy's Cafe, 2 p.m. Emma will be there. I'll stop by too if that's okay." Madison agreed and spent the morning trying to work on her new design project, but her concentration was shattered. Every few minutes, she found herself replaying the scene at Thornton's, Derek's contemptuous sneer, Richard's casual cruelty, and the moment when Jax had walked through that door like an avenging angel. At noon, her mother finally reached her. Elena was a second-generation Mexican-American woman in her 50s, strong-willed and fiercely protective of her daughter. "Madison Grace Harper, why didn't you call me last night?" Elena demanded without preamble. "Patricia Crawford just called me. She was at Thornton's and saw what happened." "Mija, are you okay?" Madison closed her eyes against the concern in her mother's voice. "I'm okay, Mom. Really. It was bad, but some people stood up for me. Bikers from Samcro." There was a long pause. "The Sons of Anarchy?" "Madison, those men are—" "They were kind," Madison interrupted gently. "They defended me when no one else would. They made Richard apologize. I'm meeting one of their wives this afternoon. She's a nurse, and she's going to help me figure out my legal options." Elena's protective instincts warred with her gratitude. "I don't know anything about these people, but if they helped you, then I'm grateful. Do you want me to come with you?" "No, Mom. I need to do this myself. But I'll call you after, okay?" After promising to be careful and to call if she needed anything, Madison ended the call and began preparing for the meeting. She chose her clothes carefully. A blue cardigan over a white blouse, jeans, and the silver necklace her grandmother had given her. Armor for a different kind of battle. Lumpy's Cafe was a charming institution. A converted gas station that served the best coffee in town and acted as neutral ground for all the town's various factions. When Madison arrived at 2 o'clock, she spotted Emma Rose Sullivan immediately. Emma was in her late 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and warm brown eyes that radiated competence and compassion. She wore scrubs with a light jacket over them, clearly having come straight from a shift at St. Thomas Hospital. She stood when Madison entered, her smile genuine and welcoming. "Madison, I'm Emma. Thank you so much for meeting me." Emma's handshake was firm but gentle. She'd already arranged the seating to accommodate Madison's wheelchair at the table. "Thank you for wanting to help," Madison replied, settling into position. "I'm still kind of overwhelmed by everything." Jax arrived moments later, carrying with him the scent of leather and motor oil. In daylight, Madison could see him more clearly. The lines around his eyes that suggested he'd lived a harder life than his years indicated. The tattoos covering his arms. The way he moved with constant awareness of his surroundings. But when he looked at her, his expression softened. "Hey, Madison, you sleep okay?" "Not really," she admitted. "I kept replaying everything." Jax nodded, as if he understood completely. "That's normal after something traumatic. What the Thorntons did, that was assault. just not physical. Don't minimize it. Emma pulled out a folder from her bag. I did some research last night after Bobby told me what happened. Madison, you have significant legal grounds for a civil rights complaint. The Americans with Disabilities Act is very clear about public accommodations. Restaurants can't refuse service based on disability, and they definitely can't cite customer comfort as justification. Madison felt a flutter of hope mixed with anxiety. But Richard said it would cost more to sue than it's worth. He was trying to intimidate you, Emma replied firmly. There are advocacy organizations that help with these cases pro bono. I've written down contact information for the Disability Rights Legal Center. They've handled cases like yours before. And honestly, given how public the incident was, you'd probably have witnesses willing to testify. Patricia Crawford already told my mom she'd testify, Madison said. She walked out of the restaurant after Richard threw me out. Jax leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The Thorntons have been getting away with shit like this for years because nobody's challenged them. Richard's got friends in local government, thinks that makes him untouchable. He needs a wake-up call. I'm scared, Madison admitted quietly. This is a small town. What if going after them makes everything worse? What if other businesses start refusing me too? Emma reached across the table and took Madison's hand. I understand that fear. I really do. But here's what I've learned as a nurse. Silence protects abusers. Richard humiliated you publicly because he thought there would be no consequences. If you fight back, you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for every disabled person who might walk into that restaurant in the future. And you won't be fighting alone, Jax added. Sam Crow's got your back. That's not an empty promise. We mean it. Madison looked between them. This nurse she'd just met, and this biker who'd crashed into her life like a force of nature, and felt something she hadn't expected. Trust. These weren't people who'd known her for years or had any obligation to her. They were simply decent humans who'd seen injustice and decided to act. Okay, Madison said, her voice growing stronger. Tell me what I need to do. Over the next hour, Emma walked Madison through the process. They discussed documenting everything. Madison wrote down every detail she remembered from the previous night while it was still fresh. Emma took photos of Madison in her wheelchair at various locations in the cafe to demonstrate that wheelchair access didn't disrupt normal business operations. Jax called Bobby, who arrived with Tommy and Marcus. All three had witnessed the incident and agreed to provide statements. We were there, we saw everything, and we'll testify to exactly what was said, Bobby assured Madison. His presence was comforting in a paternal way, and Madison found herself relaxing around him. Tommy pulled out his phone. I actually recorded part of it, he admitted sheepishly. Not the whole thing, but I got Richard saying that bit about Madison making customers uncomfortable. I started recording when I realized how bad it was getting. Madison's eyes widened. You recorded it? That's evidence. Damn right it is, Marcus confirmed. Richard can't claim he was misunderstood when there's video of him being a discriminatory asshole. As they worked, other Lumpy's customers began to approach. Word had spread through Charming about the incident at Thornton's, and people had opinions. Some, like Sharon Michelle Brennan, who owned the bookstore, were supportive. I've always thought Richard was pompous, Sharon said, her gray hair escaping from its bun. If you need character witnesses or anything, I'm happy to help. We should have stood up to his bullying years ago, but others were less supportive. Gregory Paul Simmons, who ran the hardware store and was friends with Richard, stopped by their table with a scowl. You're stirring up trouble that doesn't need stirring, Gregory told Madison bluntly. Richard runs a business. He's got the right to protect his interests. Maybe you should have just gone somewhere else instead of making a scene. Jack stood up slowly, his body language shifting from relaxed to dangerous in an instant. "Gregory, you've got about 5 seconds to walk away before this gets uncomfortable for you." Gregory's courage evaporated. He muttered something under his breath and left quickly. Emma sighed. "That's the other reality," she told Madison. "Some people are going to blame you instead of Richard. Small-town politics are complicated. Richard and Derek are established here. They employ people. They sponsor little league teams. You're going to be painted as the troublemaker who's trying to ruin a local business. Can I handle that?" Madison wondered aloud. "Better question," Jack said, sitting back down. "Can you handle not fighting back? Can you live with letting them get away with it?" Madison thought about that. She thought about every time someone had made her feel inferior because of her wheelchair. Every awkward conversation, every pitying look, every assumption that she was less capable, less valuable, less human. She thought about the next disabled person who might walk into Thornton's expecting basic human dignity, and instead receiving humiliation. "No," she said firmly. "I can't let them get away with it." Emma smiled and squeezed her hand. "Then we fight. And we fight smart. First thing Monday morning, you contact the Disability Rights Legal Center. We document everything. We build an airtight case. And we make sure Richard and Derek understand that discrimination has consequences." Bobby leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Madison, I want you to understand something. This is going to be hard. You're going to have days when you want to give up, when the pressure feels like too much. That's when you call us. Day or night doesn't matter. Sam Crow takes care of our own, and you're one of us now." "Why?" Madison asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since last night. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Jax exchanged glances with Bobby, then looked back at Madison. "You ever hear the phrase, 'stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves'? That's club philosophy. We see injustice, we handle it. Simple as that. Plus," Bobby added with a gentle smile, "you remind me of my daughter. She's about your age, studying to be a veterinarian up in Oregon. She's got a different disability, chronic illness, invisible most days, but debilitating when it flares up. I've watched her fight for accommodations, fight to be taken seriously, fight just to exist in a world that wants her to be quietly grateful for whatever scraps she's given. So when I see someone doing to you what people have done to my Sarah, yeah, I take it personally." Madison's throat tightened with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Emma advised. "Just promise you'll let us help. Promise you won't try to shoulder this alone." "I promise," Madison whispered. They spent another hour strategizing. Emma had contacts at local news stations. If the legal complaint didn't get traction, media attention might. Tommy knew a lawyer who specialized in civil rights cases and owed Sam Crow a favor. Marcus had already started a whisper campaign among Charming's business owners, making it clear that Sam Crow wouldn't tolerate discrimination. As the meeting wound down, Jax walked Madison out to her van. The afternoon had turned cloudy, and the temperature had dropped. He waited while she used the lift to get into her vehicle, not hovering, but present. "Jax," Madison said before closing her door, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Last night, when you walked into that restaurant and saw what was happening, what made you decide to intervene? You could have just turned around and left." Jax was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes distant. "My mother died when I was young," he finally said. "She had a heart condition that doctors didn't take seriously because she was married to a biker, because she lived a certain lifestyle. They dismissed her complaints, minimized her symptoms, and by the time they realized she was actually dying, it was too late. I was 17, and I watched the medical establishment fail her because they judged her instead of treating her. He focused back on Madison. What happened to you last night? That judgment, that dehumanization. I've seen it before. I know what it does to people. And I swore a long time ago that I wouldn't stand by and watch it happen if I could prevent it. So, yeah, I intervened. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Madison felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry about your mother. Me too, but she taught me something important before she died. That the measure of a person isn't in their circumstances. It's in how they treat others. You were dignified last night, even when those bastards tried to strip you of your dignity. That takes real strength. After Jax left, Madison sat in her van for a long time, processing everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Forgot to mention, Bobby and I are having people over for dinner next Saturday. Just some friends, very casual. We'd love for you to come if you're comfortable. No pressure. Madison hesitated, then typed back, I'd love to. Thank you. As she drove home through the October afternoon, past the familiar streets of Charming, Madison realized her life had irrevocably changed. Yesterday she'd been invisible, one more disabled person society could ignore. Today, she had allies, a plan, and something she'd been missing for a long time: hope. The road ahead would be difficult. She knew that. Legal battles took time, energy, and emotional resilience. The Thorntons wouldn't go down without a fight, and small-town politics would make everything messier. But for the first time in her life, Madison didn't feel alone in the fight. That evening, she called her mother and explained everything: the meeting at Lumpy's, the plan to file a formal complaint, the support from Sam Crow. Elena listened with growing amazement. Mija, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once you start, it will be hard to stop. I'm sure, Mom, I have to be. For me and for everyone else. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Your grandmother would be proud of you. She always said you had more strength than you knew. I think she was right. After hanging up, Madison opened her laptop and began drafting an email to the Disability Rights Legal Center. She detailed the incident at Thornton's, attached Tommy's video file, and listed the witnesses willing to testify. With each word she typed, she felt stronger, more certain. She was done being invisible. Done accepting crumbs of dignity. Done letting people like Richard and Derek define her worth. Madison Grace Harper was ready to fight, and she had an army of unexpected allies behind her. The Thorntons had picked the wrong person to humiliate. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind of steady downpour that turned Charming streets into rivers, and kept most people indoors. Madison sat at her desk, phone in hand, staring at the number for the Disability Rights Legal Center. She'd rehearsed what she would say a dozen times, but her finger still hovered over the call button. Her apartment was small, but comfortable. She'd moved here 2 years ago when living with her mother became too suffocating. The space was fully accessible, with wide doorways, lowered counters, and adaptive equipment that gave her independence. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound that was both comforting and isolating. Finally, she pressed call. Disability Rights Legal Center. This is Amanda speaking. How may I help you? Madison took a deep breath. My name is Madison Harper. I was discriminated against at a restaurant in Charming, California last Thursday. I was told I couldn't eat there because my wheelchair would make other customers uncomfortable. I have witnesses and video evidence, and I'd like to file a complaint. There was a pause, then Amanda's voice came back, professional but warm. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Madison. You've absolutely come to the right place. Let me connect you with one of our intake coordinators. Can you hold for just a moment? Yes, thank you. The hold music was surprisingly pleasant. Soft jazz that didn't grate on Madison's nerves. She found herself relaxing slightly. This was really happening. She was taking action. "Madison, this is Kevin Liu. I'm an attorney here at the center. Amanda briefed me on your situation. I'd like to get some details and see how we can help. Do you have time to talk now?" Kevin Liu had a calm, reassuring voice that immediately put Madison at ease. Over the next 45 minutes, she recounted everything. The initial refusal, Richard and Derek's statements, the public humiliation, and Jax's intervention. Kevin asked clarifying questions, took detailed notes, and didn't once sound skeptical or dismissive. "This is a clear ADA violation," Kevin said when she finished. "Title III specifically prohibits public accommodations from discriminating based on disability. The fact that they explicitly stated your wheelchair would make customers uncomfortable is about as blatant as it gets. And you have video evidence? That's huge. My friend Tommy recorded part of it on his phone," Madison confirmed. "And several people are willing to testify about what they witnessed." "Excellent. Here's what I propose. We file a formal complaint with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Simultaneously, we can pursue a civil suit for damages, not just compensatory for the emotional distress, but punitive to send a message. Given the evidence, I think we have a strong case." Madison's heart raced. "What would that involve? I've never sued anyone before." "I understand this is daunting," Kevin said gently. "The process can take months, sometimes longer. Discovery, depositions, possibly a trial if the Thorntons don't settle. But Madison, cases like yours are important. They establish precedent. They educate the public. And they prevent future discrimination. You wouldn't just be fighting for yourself." "That's what everyone keeps telling me," Madison replied. "But I'm scared. This is a small town. What if there's retaliation?" Kevin finished. "That's a legitimate concern, and it's also illegal. Any retaliation would only strengthen your case. And from what you've described, you have a strong support system. That matters more than you might think." They talked logistics. Kevin would need Madison to sign representation agreements, provide written statements, and collect all available evidence. He'd reach out to witnesses directly. The case would likely take 6 to 9 months minimum, possibly longer if it went to trial. "One more thing," Kevin added. "Media attention can be a double-edged sword. It applies pressure on defendants, but also invades your privacy. How would you feel about talking to press if it comes to that?" Madison thought about Emma's suggestion about news stations. "If it helps the case, I'll do it." "You're brave, Madison. Not everyone has the courage to stand up like this." After the call ended, Madison sat in silence, processing. She'd done it. She'd officially started the legal process. There was no going back now. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jax. "How'd the call go?" Madison smiled. Somehow Jax had known today was the day she'd contact the legal center. "Good. They're taking the case. The attorney thinks we have strong grounds." "Damn right you do. Listen, club meeting tonight at the Sam Crow Clubhouse. Bobby wants you there. Nothing official, just want you to meet more of the family. Emma will pick you up at 7 if you're free." Madison hesitated. The Sam Crow Clubhouse was legendary and charming, a place of myth and rumor where the motorcycle club conducted its business. Outsiders didn't typically get invited. But then again, she wasn't really an outsider anymore, was she? "I'll be ready at 7, she typed back. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Madison sent Kevin all the documentation she had. Her written account, photos, contact information for witnesses. She worked on her design project, finding that the creative work helped calm her anxious mind, and she tried not to think too hard about what the evening would bring. Emma arrived precisely at 7, driving a practical Honda sedan with a warm smile. She helped Madison transfer into the passenger seat and folded the wheelchair into the trunk with practiced efficiency. "Bobby's making chili," Emma said as they drove through the rainy evening. "And before you worry, the clubhouse is fully accessible. Bobby made sure of that years ago when one of the club members got injured in a motorcycle accident and needed a wheelchair temporarily." "I wasn't worried," Madison lied. Emma laughed. "Yes, you were. It's okay to be nervous. The clubhouse can be intimidating if you're not used to it. But everyone who'll be there tonight already knows your story and supports you. You're among friends." The Sam Crow Clubhouse was located on the outskirts of Charming, a sprawling compound surrounded by a chain-link fence. As Emma pulled through the gate, Madison saw several motorcycles parked in neat rows, a large main building, and smaller structures scattered around the property. Security lights illuminated everything despite the rain. Inside, the clubhouse was warmer and more welcoming than Madison had imagined. The main room had a long bar, pool tables, comfortable couches, and walls covered with motorcycle memorabilia and club photographs. A dozen people were scattered around. Some she recognized from Thornton's, others she'd never seen. Bobby emerged from what must have been the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Madison, glad you could make it. Come on in, don't be shy." Jax appeared at her elbow, guiding her toward a group gathered near the bar. "Madison, you've met some of the guys, but let me introduce everyone properly." Over the next few minutes, Madison met the extended Sam Crow family. There was Chibs Telford, the club's medic, with his distinctive scars and thick Scottish accent. Alexander Tig Traeger, intense and a bit unsettling but surprisingly courteous. Harry Opie Winston, a giant of a man with a gentle demeanor. And their partners, Fiona, Tig's girlfriend Jennifer Ann Morrison, and Opie's wife Lila. "We heard what you're doing," Lila said, her voice full of admiration. "Taking on the Thorntons legally. That takes guts." "More guts than I feel like I have some days," Madison admitted. "Courage isn't about not being scared," Chibs said in his thick brogue. "It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. You're doing fine, lass." Dinner was served family-style around a massive wooden table. Bobby's chili was incredible, spicy and complex, served with cornbread and beer. The conversation flowed easily, ranging from club business Madison didn't fully understand to local gossip and good-natured teasing. "So, Madison," Tommy said between bites, "I sent that video to your lawyer today. He called and said it's exactly what the case needs. Richard is fucked." "Language," Emma chided, but she was smiling. "Sorry, ma'am. Richard is legally screwed." Marcus leaned forward. "Word around town is that Richard's already contacted his own lawyer, Jacob Henry Foster. He's a corporate guy, handles business disputes. Apparently, Richard is claiming you were disruptive, and he asked you to leave for legitimate safety reasons." Madison's stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "We know it's a lie," Jax said calmly. "And we can prove it's a lie. That's why Tommy's video is so important. It contradicts Richard's narrative directly." "There's something else," Opie added, his deep voice thoughtful. "The Thorntons are starting a whisper campaign against Sam Crow, telling people we threatened them, that we're running protection rackets, trying to control charming businesses." Jax's expression darkened. "Of course they are. Can't admit they're bigoted assholes, so they try to make us the bad guys." "Will that hurt the case?" Madison asked worriedly. Kevin Liu had anticipated this. "No," Emma assured her. "What matters is what happened that night. Richard discriminated against you based on disability. His feelings about Sam Crow are irrelevant to that fact." The evening continued with pool games and more conversation. Madison found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in days. These people, bikers, mechanics, people who lived outside society's mainstream, had embraced her without hesitation or judgment. They saw her wheelchair, acknowledged it pragmatically, and then moved on to seeing her as a person. Around 10 o'clock, Bobby pulled Madison aside while others were distracted by a particularly competitive pool game. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Bobby said quietly. "This legal case is important, but it's also going to be emotionally exhausting. You're going to need support, someone to talk to when it gets hard. Emma and I want you to know our door is always open. Literally. Anytime. 3 in the morning. Doesn't matter." Madison felt overwhelmed by the kindness. "Why are you all being so good to me?" Bobby smiled, his weathered face crinkling. "Because that's what family does. And you're family now, whether you realized you were signing up for that or not." "I didn't realize motorcycle clubs worked this way," Madison admitted. "Most people don't. They see the leather and the bikes and the reputation, and they make assumptions. Yeah, Samcro's done things we're not proud of. We operate in gray areas sometimes. But at our core, we're about loyalty, protection, and standing up for what's right. You needed standing up for. So here we are." Emma joined them, slipping her arm through Bobby's. "He's right, you know. This club has its problems. God knows I could write a book. But when it comes to protecting people who need it, they're unmatched." "I don't know how to repay you," Madison said softly. "You don't repay family," Bobby replied simply. "You just pay it forward when you can." Later, as Emma drove Madison home through the rain-slicked streets, Madison reflected on the evening. She'd gone to the clubhouse, nervous and uncertain, and she was leaving with a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. Not even with her own extended family, who loved her, but often didn't know how to see past her disability. "Emma," Madison said, as they pulled up to her apartment, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. How did you end up with Bobby? I mean, you're a nurse. He's in a motorcycle club. That seems like different worlds." Emma laughed. "It is different worlds, and some days that's challenging. But Bobby is the kindest, most loyal person I've ever met. He sees me, really sees me, not just as a nurse or a wife, but as a complete person. And that's rare. I imagine you understand that feeling, of wanting to be seen as a whole person instead of reduced to one characteristic." "I do," Madison agreed. "More than you know." "That's what you're fighting for with this lawsuit," Emma continued. "The right to be seen as Madison, not just as someone in a wheelchair. It's a fight worth having." That night, as Madison prepared for bed, she received an email from Kevin Liu. The formal complaint had been filed with the Department of Justice. The civil suit would be filed by the end of the week. Things were officially in motion. Madison lay in bed, listening to the rain and thinking about how drastically her life had changed in just 4 days. Last Thursday, she'd been a freelance designer with a small victory to celebrate. Tonight, she was the plaintiff in a civil rights case, supported by a motorcycle club, and fighting for something bigger than herself. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from Jax. "Sleep well, Madison. You did good today. Tomorrow, we keep fighting." Madison smiled in the darkness and typed back, "Tomorrow, we keep fighting." 3 weeks later, Madison sat in a conference room at the Disability Rights Legal Center's charming satellite office, across from Kevin Liu and his paralegal, Rachel Ann Montgomery. November had brought colder weather, and through the window, Madison could see leaves swirling in the wind, autumn asserting itself before winter's arrival. "The Thorntons filed their response yesterday," Kevin said, sliding a document across the table. "It's about what we expected. Denial of wrongdoing, claim that you were asked to leave for legitimate safety concerns. Accusations that you and Samcro conspired to damage their business reputation." Madison scanned the legal document, feeling her anxiety spike. "They're saying I planned this?" "It's a common defense strategy," Rachel explained. She was in her late 20s, with dark hair and intense eyes. "They're trying to paint you as the aggressor and themselves as victims. It won't work, but they have to try something." "The deposition is scheduled for December 3rd, Kevin continued. "That's where their attorney will question you under oath about what happened. It can be intimidating, but we'll prepare you thoroughly. The key is to stay calm. Answer honestly, and don't let Jacob Foster rattle you." "What kind of questions will he ask?" "Everything. Your version of events, your disability, your medical history, your employment, your relationship with Sam Crow. He'll try to find inconsistencies or make you seem unreliable. But Madison, you have truth on your side. That matters." The meeting lasted 2 hours, covering strategy and timelines. When it finally ended, Madison felt mentally exhausted. She emerged from the office to find Jax waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his motorcycle despite the cold. "Figured you might need friendly face after that," Jax said, straightening up. "How'd it go?" "They're claiming I planned the whole thing to sue them." Jax's expression hardened. "Of course they are. Richard's always been a coward who can't admit when he's wrong." "You holding up okay?" "I don't know," Madison admitted honestly. "Some days I feel strong, like I'm doing the right thing. Other days, I wonder if it's worth all this stress." "Let me buy you lunch," Jax offered. "There's something I want to show you." They ended up at a small diner called Rosie's, which had been in Charming for 40 years. The owner, Rosemary Rosie Catherine Walsh, was a formidable woman in her 70s who'd known Jax since he was a child. She greeted them warmly and personally ensured Madison's wheelchair fit comfortably at their booth. "I heard about what happened at Thornton's," Rosie said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "About time someone stood up to Richard and his entitled nonsense. You need anything, honey, you let me know." After Rosie left, Jax pulled out his phone and showed Madison a Facebook post that had been circulating Charming. It was from Patricia Crawford, the woman who'd walked out of Thornton's in protest. The post read, "3 weeks ago, I witnessed something that made me ashamed to be a Charming resident. Richard and Derek Thornton threw a young woman out of their restaurant because she uses a wheelchair. They told her she made customers uncomfortable. I've been a loyal customer for years, but I will never set foot in Thornton's again. Discrimination is not a Charming value. Stand with Madison Harper." The post had over 200 shares and hundreds of comments, most supportive, but some defending the Thorntons. "It's gone viral, at least locally," Jax explained. "People are taking sides. Some businesses have put up signs saying they're ADA compliant and welcoming to all customers. Basically, taking a stance against what Thornton's did. Others are defending Richard, saying you're trying to ruin a family business over a misunderstanding." Madison scrolled through the comments, her emotions swinging between gratitude for the support and hurt from the criticism. One comment in particular stung. "This girl is just looking for a payday. Richard runs a good business and doesn't deserve this persecution. How do you deal with people saying horrible things about you?" Madison asked Jax. He was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "I remember that people who matter know the truth. The rest are just noise. Sam Crow's been called every name in the book. Criminals, thugs, troublemakers. Some of it's even deserved. But we know who we are and what we stand for. You need that same certainty." Their food arrived, burgers and fries that were simple but delicious. As they ate, Jax told Madison about the club's history, about his father's vision for Sam Crow, about the complicated relationship between the club and the town. "Charming's always been weird about us," Jax explained. "They need us. We provide jobs through the automotive shop. We keep certain criminal elements out of town. We support local causes. But they also fear us because we operate outside their normal social structure. That tension has always existed. And now you're supporting me, which makes the Thorntons paint you as the bad guys. Let them. We've been the bad guys before. We'll survive. After lunch, Jax drove Madison to a community center on Charming's south side. Inside, a support group was in session, the Charming Disability Advocacy Network, a small organization Madison had never heard of. Emma told me about them, Jax explained. Thought you might want to meet some folks who've fought similar battles. The group consisted of about 15 people with various disabilities, some in wheelchairs like Madison, others with invisible disabilities, still others with sensory impairments. They met weekly to discuss challenges, share resources, and support each other. The facilitator, Michael Stephen Russo, had lost his legs in a military service and used a wheelchair. He welcomed Madison warmly. "We've been following your case," Michael said. "You're doing something important. How are you holding up?" Madison found herself opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone except her mother and Emma. She talked about the fear, the second-guessing, the weight of fighting not just for herself, but for a larger principle. An older woman named Dorothy Jean Martinez, who was blind and used a service dog, spoke up. "I sued a movie theater 20 years ago for refusing to let my guide dog into screenings. Everyone told me I was making a big deal out of nothing, that I should just go to a different theater. But it wasn't about the movies. It was about the principle that I had a right to exist in public spaces like everyone else." "Did you win?" Madison asked. "Eventually. It took 3 years and was hell the entire time. But that theater changed their policies, and other theaters in the region followed suit. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Also, absolutely. Because nothing changes if good people stay silent." The meeting continued with others sharing their stories. Battles won and lost, small victories and crushing defeats. The daily exhaustion of existing in an ableist world. Madison realized she wasn't alone in her struggle, that her experience at Thornton's was part of a larger pattern. After the meeting, several members approached Madison with offers of support. Michael gave her his contact information and invited her to become a regular participant. Dorothy offered to testify as an expert witness about the broader patterns of disability discrimination if needed. "You've built something here," Madison told Michael as the meeting broke up. "A real community. That's what gets us through," Michael replied. "We can't control how society treats us, but we can control how we support each other. Remember that when things get hard." As Jax drove Madison home, she'd left her van at her apartment that morning. She felt simultaneously drained and energized. The legal battle was daunting, but she wasn't fighting alone. She had Samcro. She had the advocacy network. She had people who understood. "Thank you for today," Madison said as they pulled up to her building. "For lunch and for introducing me to the support group. Thank Emma. It was her idea. But you're welcome. Madison, I know this is hard. It's going to get harder before it gets better. But you're stronger than you think." That evening, Madison received a call from her mother. Elena had heard about the Thorntons' legal response and was worried. "Mija, are you sure you want to continue this? They're saying terrible things about you. Maybe it would be better to drop the case and move on." "Mom, I can't. If I give up now, Richard wins. And every other disabled person who walks into his restaurant loses." Elena sighed. I know. I'm just worried about you. This stress can't be good for your health." "I'm managing," Madison assured her, though it was only partially true. The stress was affecting her. She was sleeping poorly, her muscles were tenser, her overall pain levels had increased. But giving up felt worse than enduring. After talking with her mother, Madison tried to work on her design projects but couldn't concentrate. Instead, she found herself reading through the Facebook comments on Patricia's post, torturing herself with the negative ones. People like her always want special treatment. Why couldn't she just find a different restaurant? She's using her disability to get attention and money. Each comment was a small knife. Death by 1,000 cuts. Madison knew she shouldn't read them, but she couldn't stop. Her phone rang. Bobby's name on the screen. "Hey, Madison, it's Bobby. Emma said you had a tough meeting today. Just calling to check in." Madison felt tears spring to her eyes at the simple kindness. "I'm okay. Just tired." "That's allowed. You're carrying a lot right now. Listen, Saturday is Thanksgiving. I know you probably have plans with your family, but if you want to stop by the clubhouse afterward, we're having a big dinner. Open invitation." "I'll think about it," Madison promised. "Thank you for calling, Bobby." "Anytime, kid. That's what I'm here for." The next few days blurred together. Madison worked on her design projects, prepared for her deposition with Kevin's guidance, and tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. But everything felt different now. She couldn't go anywhere in Charming without being recognized, without people either offering support or criticism. On Wednesday, Madison went to the grocery store and found herself face-to-face with Derek Thornton in the produce section. He looked at her with pure hatred. "You're ruining my family's business," he hissed, stepping closer. "Whatever money you think you're going to get isn't worth what's coming to you." Madison's heart raced. "Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Drop this lawsuit or what?" The voice came from behind Madison. She turned to see Marcus, who'd apparently been shopping in the same store. He moved to stand between Madison and Derek, his posture protective and menacing simultaneously. "Or nothing," Derek finished weakly. Just leave us alone." He grabbed his items and hurried away. Marcus turned to Madison. "You okay? Did he hurt you?" "No, just scared me. Thank you for being here." "I wasn't following you or anything creepy," Marcus assured her quickly. "Just lucky timing. But Madison, if Derek or Richard approach you again, you call one of us immediately and document it. That was intimidation, possibly witness tampering." Madison reported the incident to Kevin, who documented it and sent a formal letter to Jacob Foster, warning that any further contact between the Thorntons and Madison would be considered harassment. Jacob responded with his own letter claiming Derek had merely been shopping and any conversation was coincidental. The stress was mounting from all directions. Madison started having nightmares about the deposition, about being questioned and humiliated all over again. She woke up some nights in a panic, her body rigid with tension. Thursday was Thanksgiving. Madison spent the day with her mother and extended family, her aunt, uncle, and 3 cousins. They were supportive, but their well-meaning questions wore her down. Did she really want to drag this out? Couldn't she just accept Richard's apology and move on? Why did she have to involve bikers in her business? "Because they're the only ones who stood up for me," Madison finally snapped during dessert, surprising everyone including herself. "When every other person in that restaurant looked away, when people were complicit in my humiliation, the Sons of Anarchy defended me. So, yes, they're involved, and I'm grateful for that." The table fell silent. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand, understanding passing between them without words. Later that evening, Madison did accept Bobby and Emma's invitation. The clubhouse was transformed, decorated with autumn colors, long tables laden with food, children running around supervised by club members who showed surprising patience. It was chaotic and warm, and everything her family dinner hadn't been. Jax found her near the fireplace, watching the scene with something like wonder. "This is what Thanksgiving should feel like," Madison said softly. Family, Jax agreed, his voice carrying that philosophical tone she'd noticed before. Not always blood, but always loyal. That's what Sam Crow's built on, choosing who matters and protecting them no matter what. Your father would be proud of what you're doing, Emma said, joining them with plates of pie. Standing up for Madison, using the club's influence for good. That's the legacy John Teller wanted for Sam Crow. Jax's expression flickered with something Madison couldn't quite identify. Grief, maybe, or determination. My dad believed the club should protect the vulnerable, should stand for something beyond profit and violence. We don't always live up to that ideal, but we try. The evening continued with warmth and laughter. Madison played cards with Bobby and some of the younger members, listened to Chibs tell stories about Scotland, and felt more at home than she had in her own family gathering. As November turned to December, the pressure intensified. Madison's deposition loomed, and the Thorntons' legal team was preparing aggressively. Jacob Foster sent multiple document requests, demanding Madison's complete medical records, financial information, and detailed accounts of every instance she'd faced discrimination. "They're trying to overwhelm you," Kevin explained during a prep session. "Make you feel violated and exposed so you'll drop the case. Don't let them." Emma helped Madison organize her medical records, carefully redacting information that wasn't relevant to the case. Jax arranged for Sam Crow members to accompany her to all legal meetings. A silent but powerful show of support. The night before her deposition, Madison couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her mind racing through every possible question, every potential trap. At 2 a.m, she finally called Bobby, remembering his offer. "I'm terrified," she admitted when he answered on the second ring. "What if I mess this up? What if I say something wrong and ruin the whole case?" "Then you say something wrong," Bobby replied calmly. "You're human, Madison. You're allowed to be imperfect, but you're also telling the truth. And that's more powerful than any legal trick Foster can pull." I just keep thinking about facing them again. Richard and Derek, watching me, judging me. "They should be terrified of facing you," Bobby countered. "You're the one with truth and justice on your side. They're the ones who have to explain why they thought it was acceptable to discriminate. Don't give them power they don't deserve." Emma's voice came through in the background, and Bobby relayed her message. "Emma says to remember you've already survived the worst part, the actual humiliation. Everything else is just paperwork and procedure. You've got this." Madison hung up feeling marginally better, though sleep still eluded her. She spent the pre-dawn hours reviewing her notes, preparing herself mentally for the battle ahead. December 3rd arrived cold and overcast, the kind of day where the sun never quite broke through the clouds. Madison dressed carefully in professional attire, a navy blazer over a cream blouse, her hair styled neatly. Minimal makeup, armor for legal battle. Kevin met her at the law office where the deposition would take place. The building was downtown charming, all glass and steel, intimidating in its corporate sterility. Jax and Bobby waited in the parking lot, their motorcycles gleaming despite the gray weather. "We'll be right here when you're done," Jax promised. His presence was calming. This man who could be dangerous when needed, but who'd shown her nothing but protection and respect. Inside, the conference room was dominated by a massive table. Jacob Foster was already there, a man in his 50s with silver hair and expensive suit, radiating the kind of confidence that came from years of corporate victories. Richard and Derek Thornton sat beside him, both avoiding Madison's gaze. Sons of Anarchy. Fandom. "Miss Harper," Jacob said smoothly, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Thank you for being here today. This shouldn't take more than a few hours." It took 6. Jacob's questions started simply: her name, address, employment history. Then they turned more invasive. He asked about her medical condition, forcing her to describe her cerebral palsy in clinical detail. He asked about her income, insinuating she was financially desperate and saw the lawsuit as a payday. He asked about her relationship with Sam Crow, suggesting she'd been coached or manipulated. "Isn't it true, Miss Harper, that you've been romantically involved with Mr. Teller?" Jacob asked, his tone insinuating something sordid. "No," Madison replied firmly. Kevin had prepared her for this. Jax Teller and other Sam Crow members have been supportive friends during this difficult time. There's nothing romantic about our relationship. But they have a vested interest in damaging my client's business, don't they? Sam Crow has a history of intimidation and— "Objection," Kevin interrupted. "Sam Crow isn't on trial here. The facts of what happened at Thornton's restaurant on October 24th are what matter." The deposition continued, exhausting and demoralizing. Jacob tried every tactic, questioning Madison's memory, suggesting she'd misunderstood Richard's intentions, implying her wheelchair genuinely did create safety hazards. "Mr. Thornton was concerned about fire code compliance," Jacob stated. "Surely you can understand that as a business owner, he has responsibilities to all customers?" "Fire code allows for wheelchair access," Madison countered, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "And Mr. Thornton didn't say anything about fire codes. He said my presence would make customers uncomfortable. There's video evidence of that statement." Jacob's expression tightened. The video was his weak point, and everyone in the room knew it. When they finally broke for lunch, Madison was shaking. Kevin guided her to a private office where Emma was waiting with food and emotional support. "You're doing great," Emma assured her. "He's trying to rattle you, but you're holding your ground." "I want to punch him," Madison admitted. "That's a normal reaction," Kevin said with a slight smile. "But your calm, factual responses are much more effective." Jacob's getting desperate. That's why he's grasping at straws about Sam Crow and your motivations. The afternoon session focused on the events of October 24th. Madison recounted every detail: her excitement about celebrating, her hope for a normal dinner, the crushing humiliation when Richard refused to serve her. She described Derek's contemptuous comments, the other diners' complicit silence, and the moment everything changed when Jax walked through that door. "And what did Mr. Teller say to my client?" Jacob asked. He explained that what Mr. Thornton was doing violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. He gave Mr. Thornton an opportunity to correct his behavior. By threatening him? By explaining consequences. Madison corrected, echoing Jax's words. He pointed out that discrimination has ramifications: social, legal, and ethical. Mr. Thornton chose to apologize rather than face those consequences. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Derek stared at the table, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. "Did you plan to file this lawsuit before the incident occurred?" Jacob asked, attempting a different angle. "Of course not. I just wanted dinner. But after what happened, after experiencing that level of public humiliation and discrimination, I realized I had a responsibility to do something, not just for myself, but for every disabled person who might face similar treatment." "How noble," Jacob said sarcastically. "It is noble," Madison shot back, her anger finally breaking through. "Because fighting this isn't easy. It's exposed me to public scrutiny, stress, and people like you trying to tear apart my character. But it's worth it if it means one less person has to experience what I experienced." The room fell silent. Even Jacob seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The deposition finally concluded at 5:30. Madison felt wrung out, every emotional resource depleted. But she'd survived. She'd told her truth clearly and consistently. And she hadn't let Jacob Foster break her. Jax and Bobby were waiting exactly where they'd promised, joined now by several other Sam Crow members. When Madison emerged from the building, they surrounded her with protective warmth. "How'd it go?" Jax asked, reading her exhaustion immediately. "I survived," Madison replied. "It was awful, but I survived." "That's more than surviving," Bobby corrected gently. "That's winning." They took her to Lumpy's for dinner, refusing to let her go home alone to process the day's trauma. Over burgers and coffee, Madison recounted the deposition's worst moments, finding catharsis in their supportive anger on her behalf. "Foster's a snake," Marcus declared. "Everyone knows it. But you stood up to him, and that matters." The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Jacob Foster reached out to Kevin with a settlement offer, $15,000, and a written apology, with the Thorntons admitting no wrongdoing. "It's insulting," Kevin told Madison over the phone. "They're trying to buy you off cheap. We should reject it and proceed to trial." "What do you think our chances are at trial?" Madison asked. "Excellent. The video evidence alone virtually guarantees a win. You'd likely get significantly more in damages. Plus, the precedent would be stronger." Madison thought about it for 2 days. She discussed it with Emma, with her mother, with Jax and Bobby. Everyone had opinions, but ultimately, the decision was hers. "I want to go to trial," Madison finally told Kevin. "Not for the money, but because a settlement with no admission of wrongdoing doesn't change anything. Richard and Derek need to be held publicly accountable." Kevin's voice was pleased. "I was hoping you'd say that. Let's make them face real consequences." The trial was scheduled for February. As Christmas approached, Charming was transformed with decorations and seasonal cheer. The controversy surrounding Madison's case continued to divide the community, but momentum seemed to be shifting in her favor. The Charming Examiner, the local newspaper, published a feature story on disability rights, prominently featuring Madison's case. Patricia Crawford organized a community forum on accessibility, which drew impressive attendance. Local businesses began reviewing their own ADA compliance, not wanting to face similar lawsuits. Madison's design business was thriving. Several local companies hired her specifically because they admired her courage, wanting to support her fight for justice. The irony wasn't lost on her. Richard had tried to humiliate her into invisibility, but instead, he'd made her visible in ways that empowered her. Reddit Christmas Eve found Madison at the Sam Crow Clubhouse again, now a familiar and welcome presence. The club had adopted her completely, treating her like family. Emma had become a close friend, Bobby a father figure, and Jax. Jax was something she was still figuring out. "Can I talk to you?" Jax asked. Finding her alone near the Christmas tree, the club had decorated with surprising care. "Of course." They moved to a quieter corner. Jax seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, his usual confidence wavering. "I've been thinking about why your case matters so much to me," Jax began. "Beyond the obvious injustice, I think it's because you remind me of what my father wanted Sam Crow to be. Protectors, not predators. Champions for people who need championing." "That's a lot of pressure," Madison said softly. "It's not pressure. It's inspiration. Watching you fight, watching you refuse to be diminished, that's real courage. The kind my dad wrote about in his manuscript. Moral courage, not just physical bravery." Madison felt her face warm. "I couldn't have fought without you all. Without Sam Crow's support, I probably would have given up." "No, you wouldn't have," Jax said with certainty. "You've got steel in you, Madison Harper. We just helped you remember that." The moment hung between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Then Bobby called them back to the party, and the moment passed, though its warmth remained. January brought intensive trial preparation. Kevin assembled an impressive case: Madison's testimony, the video evidence, witness statements from Bobby, Tommy, Marcus, Patricia Crawford, and several other Thornton's customers who'd been present that night. He also brought in Dorothy Martinez from the Disability Advocacy Group as an expert witness on patterns of discrimination. Jacob Foster tried one more settlement offer, $50,000 and a formal apology. It was tempting, but Madison refused. "I want them to sit in that courtroom and face what they did publicly," she told Kevin. "I want a jury to tell them they were wrong. Money doesn't fix that." The trial began on February 9th. The courthouse was packed. Local media, community members on both sides of the issue, and Samcro members in force. Jax, Bobby, Emma, and several others filled an entire row. A visible reminder that Madison wasn't alone. Opening statements laid out the battle lines. Kevin painted a picture of casual cruelty and discrimination, of a young woman simply trying to celebrate a professional achievement who was instead publicly humiliated. Jacob Foster countered with claims of misunderstanding, legitimate business concerns, and an attack on Samcro's involvement. Madison's testimony was the trial's centerpiece. For 2 days, she recounted her experience, answering both Kevin's supportive questions and Jacob's aggressive cross-examination. She remained composed, factual, and quietly powerful. The video evidence was devastating. Watching Richard state clearly that Madison's presence would make customers uncomfortable, hearing Derek's contemptuous dismissal, the jury's expressions shifted from neutral to disturbed. Bobby's testimony was particularly effective. His gentle demeanor and obvious protective care for Madison painted Samcro not as intimidating criminals, but as concerned citizens witnessing injustice. "I saw a young woman being humiliated for something completely beyond her control," Bobby testified. "I saw business owners abusing their power, and I saw everyone else in that restaurant looking away. That's when I knew we had to intervene, because silence enables abuse." Patricia Crawford's testimony corroborated everything. Dorothy Martinez provided context about systemic discrimination against disabled individuals, making Madison's experience part of a larger pattern. The defense tried to discredit the witnesses, to paint Samcro as manipulative, to suggest Madison had manufactured the incident. But the evidence was too strong, the testimonies too consistent. Richard and Derek took the stand in their own defense, and it was a disaster. Under cross-examination, Richard couldn't articulate a legitimate business reason for refusing Madison's service. Derek's contempt for disabled individuals came through clearly despite his attempts to appear sympathetic. Closing arguments were passionate. Kevin spoke about dignity, about the fundamental right to exist in public spaces without fear of humiliation, about the importance of holding institutions accountable when they fail to meet basic standards of human decency. Jacob Foster tried to redirect focus to Samcro's alleged intimidation, but even he seemed to know it was a lost cause. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged teacher named Susan Elizabeth Montgomery, read the verdict with clear conviction. "In the matter of Harper versus Thornton Family Restaurant, we find for the plaintiff on all counts. We award compensatory damages of $75,000 and punitive damages of $150,000. The courtroom erupted. Madison felt tears stream down her face as Kevin squeezed her hand. Behind her, she heard Samcro's cheers, felt the weight of months of pressure finally lift. The judge added his own statement. Mr. Thornton, the jury has spoken clearly. Your actions were discriminatory and harmful. I hope this verdict serves as a wake-up call not just to you, but to all business owners in this community. Disability rights are civil rights, and they will be enforced." Outside the courthouse, Madison was surrounded by supporters. Emma hugged her tightly. Bobby lifted her hand in victory like a champion. Jax stood slightly apart, his smile proud and genuine. Media descended, requesting interviews. Madison agreed to one, a local news station that had covered the trial fairly. "How does it feel to win?" the reporter asked. "It feels like justice," Madison replied. "But more than that, it feels like change. This verdict sends a message that discrimination has consequences, that disabled individuals have value and deserve respect. If this case helps even one person stand up for their rights, then everything was worth it." The interview went viral, shared across social media, and picked up by national outlets. Madison became briefly famous, a symbol of resistance against discrimination, of the power of standing up even when it's difficult. The settlement money allowed Madison to expand her design business, hiring an assistant and renting proper office space. She donated a significant portion to the Charming Disability Advocacy Network, ensuring others would have resources she'd been lucky enough to find. Thornton's restaurant closed 3 months after the verdict. The combination of the financial judgment, boycotts, and destroyed reputation proved insurmountable. The building was eventually sold and reopened as a community center focused on accessibility and inclusion. Richard and Derek left Charming. Some said they moved to Nevada, others claimed they'd gone to Oregon. Madison didn't care. They were no longer her problem. Spring arrived with warmth and renewal. Madison stood in her new office, surrounded by design proofs and client proposals, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jax. "Dinner at the clubhouse tonight? Bobby's making his famous ribs." Madison smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." As she prepared to leave, she paused to look at a framed news article on her wall, the Charming Examiner's coverage of the trial verdict, with the headline, "Local Woman Wins Landmark Disability Rights Case." She'd come so far from that October evening, when she'd been humiliated and broken. She'd found her voice, her strength, and a family she'd never expected. The Sons of Anarchy, rough, complicated, deeply loyal, had shown her that protection comes from unexpected places, that justice sometimes wears leather and rides motorcycles. Madison Grace Harper had set out to celebrate a small professional victory and ended up fighting a battle that changed her community. She'd faced her worst fears and emerged stronger. She'd learned that silence enables abuse, that courage can be cultivated, and that family isn't always defined by blood. As she locked her office and headed toward another evening with the people who'd become her chosen family, Madison felt gratitude for the journey, even the painful parts, because those painful parts had led her here, to a life where she was seen, valued, and loved for exactly who she was. The road had been hard, but she'd traveled it with allies who never wavered. And that, she realized, was the greatest victory of all.